Here's a foul ball that found the money. Knocked the wallet out of this dude's hands.
The fan who tried to catch a foul ball
for everybody
with the wallet in their hands with the panel. Let's see the panel. Here's an idea. The panel who caught a mute and lost their wallet. Yeah. Let's go around the horn.
Give me that money. More money, more problems. Straight cash, homie.
A trade you said could not happen. A trade the league's salary cap structure said could not happen. A trade that will bring an unstoppable force and an immovable object back together. And a trade that will bring Season 2 Chernobyl to a franchise in the NBA as well. We'll get to a reporter who's going to have a face tattoo because of this trade as well. Russell Westbrook to the Rockets, Chris Paul to the Thunder. Start with how this happened and how good the Rockets are now, Frank Isola.
Well, Oklahoma City 7 days ago made a trade which helped the Clippers. Last night they make a trade which helps the Houston Rockets. We had heard that James Harden and Chris Paul were not getting along. They get younger with a player like Russell Westbrook. Russell Westbrook was a teammate of James Harden. They get along very well. And before you sit there and tell me Russell Westbrook doesn't play well with others, Kevin Durant was an MVP as a teammate of Russell Westbrook. And this past season, Paul George finished third. Let's remember that.
Woody Page?
Well, as you recall, Tony, on Tuesday, when everybody was talking about him going to the Heat, I said the Rockets because that's what I wanted to see, and I think we're going to find it very entertaining. And what's going to happen as a result of this? They are going to be reunited. They played well together before, as Frank was talking about. Right. I think that Westbrook is going to be happy again. He's going to be surrounded by talent. I think as a result of that, the Houston Rockets now are relevant in terms of the Western Conference Championship. You've got to include them in the top four again.
Well, they weren't irrelevant. I mean, they were minutes away from playing in the Western Conference Finals and playing in the NBA Finals. Israel Gutierrez,
well, that's what
how
I'm
good
saying.
are the Rockets now with Westbrook and Harden?
I think they can be slightly better than they were with Chris Paul and Harden, which is saying a lot, right? Because they were the biggest threats of the Warriors in the Western Conference for the last couple of years. I think it just adds a different dynamic. When it goes, sort of your turn, my turn with Chris Paul and James Harden, it's very similar, usually ends up in a jump shot of some sort or in a dunk in somebody else's hands. Russell Westbrook can take it to the basket on his own. He can create that fast pace game that they really didn't have as much, especially last year. And what does Mike D'Antoni do with point guards? He kind of makes them better, right? So if he's a guy who handles a lot, gets those big assist numbers, I mean, he could absolutely flourish there next year.
Well, let's go deeper in that to you, Kevin. How does this work exactly? How does the ball move? How much do they have to change their games, D'Antoni too, and who has to do the changing?
Well, if anybody has to do the changing, I think it's going to be Westbrook just because he's so ball dominant and he's probably going to be the point guard. He's not going to be the off guard. But the thing that excites me about this is the fact that, they played together before, but when they played together before, they weren't MVPs. Since then, they have become MVPs separately in this league, and you put them together. And, of course, the other thing that's happening here is they're not looking at the Golden State Warriors now because the Golden State Warriors are not the old Golden State Warriors. Now they're looking at the Lakers and the Clippers and how they match up with those guys, and they're going to have to beat them with speed.
And where do you think that matchup leads them? Do you think they're a top 3 team in the Western Conference? Do you think they're a top 1 team in the Western Conference?
I think they're a top 3 team in the Western Conference. I think that they can take out either of those other teams.
Frank, answer that question first, and then talk to me about the changes these players have to make to play together now.
Yeah, I think they're a top 4 team. And as Izzy mentioned, the last 2 years, they did lose to Golden State, which is the best team in the NBA. That's who knocked them out. I thought it was an overreaction, them firing the entire coaching staff. They were desperate. They wanted to do something. And I think this move is going to work. Now, Mike D'Antoni, who you guys mentioned, he might have to cut the basketball in half, but I think Westbrook wanted to go to Houston. He wanted to be there. So he's going to know that it's still James Harden's team, for lack of a better term. So he's the one that's going to have to fit in, not necessarily James
Woody Page, any concerns about them playing together?
No, not at all. I think Westbrook is going to change his game. What is his strength? Well, he was a triple-double guy. We know that he can't shoot three-pointers. Everybody backed off and let him shoot them last year. Shot 29%. So he has to play point guard. He will be feeding the ball to Harden, who can shoot three-pointers. What is his other strength? He's a great rebounder for a guard, maybe the best in the league. So if he goes to the boards and offers them some offensive rebounding and defensive rebounding, I think that's going to be about. He can average 13, 14 assists a game, and I mean that in reality, because he can get the ball to Harden and those other guys. So I think he's going to make the adjustments, and he's the one who has to adjust. He has to play point guard for them.
Israel, view it this way. In D'Antoni's offense, so three-point dominant, and now you add Russell Westbrook, and that's not his best part of his game.
Right, no, and so when the two are on the floor together, meaning Harden and Westbrook, it will be Westbrook that has to make the bigger change. He will have to find a way to play off the ball. He will have to just get better at catch and shoot threes sometimes. But if you look at the numbers with Chris Paul last couple years with James Harden off the floor, even last year when it looked like maybe Chris Paul had a down year, he was basically giving you 22 and 10 with Harden off the floor per 36 minutes. So if Russell can do that, Mike D'Antoni does a good job of staggering the minutes there, and Russell plays well when Harden's off the floor, then he doesn't really have to be that great number 2 scorer when Harden's in there. He can do it.
Nobody is calling this the favorite in the Western Conference now. Nobody's saying this is better than what the Lakers are.
Not when Paul George and Kawhi Leonard are going to defend both of those guys.
Well, let me ask you this then. Rank the duos in the NBA right now. Everybody's doing this today. Let's do it here. Rank the duos in the NBA. Harden Westbrook, LeBron Davis, Kawhi George, Durant Irving. Who else you want to throw in there? Embiid, Simmons, anybody. Go ahead, Frank.
Well, I would still have to go with LeBron and Anthony Davis, even though I love what the Clippers have done. You're getting a 2-time Finals MVP. But LeBron, if healthy, Anthony Davis is healthy. You're talking about a pretty dynamic combination. They could also defend, and LeBron is going to have the ball in his hands. He's going to be a dominant player this season after playing just 55 games last year.
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be LeBron and AD for me, number 1. Number 2, I've got to go with what the Clippers did with Kawhi and Paul George. Number 3, I think now it's got to be Westbrook and Harden. And number 4, it's got to be Dame and CJ, who have been fabulous as a duo backcourt.
Wow, so you got Portland as the 4 on your little Mount Rushmore there of duos in the NBA. Right. Israel, how about you?
I mean, I want to say LeBron and AD. They seem to have the most variety there as well. But, man, I'm just falling in love with the idea of Paul George and Kawhi Leonard defending on the perimeter. And the way Kawhi Leonard has become such an offensive force, the two of those might be there.
And Woody Page.
I would take Giannis and anybody if you really want to go through.
Middleton, okay.
The MVP, we're not even talking about him. But in regard, I have to agree. I think it's going to be, LeBron and Rondo, at least now they've improved from that combination. I think the Lakers number
Davis
1, number
and
2
LeBron, of course.
would be the Clippers.
Yeah.
So if you take L.A.,
all these duos of guys who haven't played together last year or recently in the case of Westbrook and Harden, except for Dame and CJ McCollum. Because Durant Irving, one's going to be out all year, and then Klay Thompson and Steph Curry, one's going to be out all year. Simmons and Embiid, nobody was tempted with that one. All right. Nobody thinks the Thunder are going to hold on to Chris Paul, do they? No. Maybe the Thunder can get some draft picks. Maybe they can do that. That'd be nice. KB, who should make a run for Paul?
Well, it's got to be either Detroit or Miami, right? I mean, nothing has changed in the East. That's where we thought Westbrook might wind up, some of us. So if I'm Detroit or if I'm Miami, I'm making that play for CP3 right now. And I think between those two teams, I think Detroit, I'm making the hardest.
Israel, that was a big exhale you just gave Blackistone, please.
I mean, you want to put Chris Paul and Blake Griffin back together, you go ahead and do that, KB. I'm not taking them if I'm Detroit. I can find the argument for Miami, mostly because, as I said earlier, if you look at Chris Paul's numbers without James Harden on the floor, he can still give you 20 and 10 in his sleep over the course of a season if he's back in his traditional role. And I think with the coaching of Eric Spoelstra, the culture of the Miami Heat, you got Jimmy Buckets there, who's very similar in terms of attitude and mentality. I think you can convince yourself of that for that team. And if they're trying to save space for 2021, they've proven to you this year they don't need salary cap space to make big.
Woody Page?
Yeah. Good luck on having Butler and Chris Paul together. How's that going to work out?
We say this with everybody now.
Number 3 team.
I don't want any part of that. Frank, you're sitting there laughing. Why aren't the Knicks in here? Why aren't they coming here? Try and get somebody.
Money.
I think if you want to attract somebody in New York, you bring in Chris Paul. At least you got and say, well, we weren't totally shut out. I'm serious about that. I think the Knicks should get in the middle of this.
Yeah.
And say, okay, we're going to bring.
Frank doesn't seem to think it's possible that the Knicks would never go after a guy who's due a lot of money and who's past his prime and gaining an age. I mean, Frank, the Knicks would never do that. So please expound.
Yeah, I can't believe I'm saying this, but the Knicks might be too smart for that. Plus, they just signed a bunch of guys, so they would have to wait till probably December to make a move like that. Miami, you're hearing conflicting reports about whether or not they want Chris Paul. The amazing thing is, Chris Paul signed that contract, and all we heard was, you'll never be able to trade that contract. Now we're thinking he might get traded twice within a week, going from Oklahoma City to someplace else. It's hard to believe.
Nobody wants to say the Lakers. Lakers make a move. You know, we had Rondo and Avery Bradley, but it's a trade. Maybe
10
somebody's
years
going
too late.
10 years too late. Yes, I understand that, but I mean, just
Miami's the best team.
Miami's the best option. Well, where the Thunder are today and where they were 2 weeks ago, all right? 15 draft picks. How did they make out, Israel?
I mean, you can say whatever you like about the number of draft picks that they have and the potential for the future, but they're right back into that small market routine where it's all about just potential and hope. And they sort of, they had their chances in this time with that trio, I suppose. And, in 2012, they ran into a super team. Against the Warriors, they ran into a super team and Klay Thompson in Game 6. They underachieved barely, but it's hard to say really be hard on them when you look at the teams.
You think it's hard to be hard on them? Well, let's expand it here, Frank. Also where they were 7 years ago when they made the finals. They got one finals appearance out of 3 MVPs and traded all 3 away in the end. Or lost 1 to free agency.
Well, to me, the big game changer was losing that Game 6 of the Golden State Warriors, the 73-win Golden State Warriors. And when they lost Game 7, Kevin Durant ended up leaving. They win that game at home. Chances are Kevin Durant resigns or in the finals. The history changes. Say this about Sam Presti. They lucked into Kevin Durant because Greg Oden was drafted by Portland. But he did draft James Harden, Russell Westbrook, Serge Ibaka. They have a ton of picks. Paul George could have left last year for nothing. Think about what they got for Paul George, who's coming back from shoulder surgery, and it makes a lot of money. I think Sam Presti had a very good week the past 7 days.
Woody, let me ask you this. This was a team that historically now will have all these MVPs, but they have 1 finals appearance. They traded away 2. They lost 1 famously. How will you remember the Oklahoma City Thunder for these past decade or so?
Not quite the way that Scott Brooks said yesterday when asked about what could you have done there, and he said win 5 NBA championships. No, but they could have. I think if they'd have kept that group together, they would have been in the finals, I think, 2 or 3 times and had a chance to win a championship. But now you got a situation where the Sooner State, that's what Oklahoma is, it's become the later state. It's going to be 7 years later.
All right. Okay, yeah, we know.
They never should have traded Harden. Harden was the bad trade.
Who among you is going to be the first to tell Oklahoma City Mayor David Holt to comment? Because last week, right before free agency started, he's like, a blessing to have an MVP and MVP finalist on our roster. Dynamic, Robertson's coming back. We're looking good. Also, how about this?
Stick to politics.
Rockets reporter Taylor Pate of Red Nation Hoops did not think Chris Paul Russell Westbrook would happen. He thought it so certainly he said he would get a Westbrook tattoo on his face of his triple-double stat line if it happens. What happens now, Taylor? What happens now? We'll be back with Buy or Sell.
Be careful making promises.
He'll put it under his beard like you, Blackstone.